day to viewers, the Colonel speaking to you live from the Grange, British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting. Today we've got one of the Columbia Graphophone Company International Educational Society records. This is Lecture 6, Part 3 and 4, What is History? By Sir Charles Oman, KBE MP, Chichele Professor of Modern History at the University of Oxford. This is D4009. I'll turn over halfway through. If you haven't fallen asleep, here we go. Should be quite good.
The judgment of the man who moralizes on history may be either optimistic or pessimistic. That is settled either by the atmosphere of the moment, the thinker's nation, class or religion, which may be faring well or faring ill, or else by his personal mentality and character. For there have been optimists in dark ages and pessimists in times of prosperity. On the whole, pessimism is the more ancient and universal creed. Impressed by the tales told us by respected grandfathers, most men have been prone to think, like Horace and Hesiod, that they themselves are of a degenerate race. All over the world, nations have been content to believe in the good old times, the golden age, which has been lost owing to the perversity of the younger generation. Our ancestors were divine, or semi-divine. They walked the earth 30 feet high, like the Moses the Talmud. They lived 300, 400, 700 years. They could, like Homer's Hector, lift a stone which scarce two of the strongest of modern men, striving mightily, could tear from the soil. They bestrode elephants and used palm trees as walking sticks. And the earth on which they dwelt was a more genial clime than ours, which produced 3 harvests a year and flowed with milk and honey. By some ancestral fault, because Adam and Eve ate the bitter apple of knowledge, or because Pandora opened the fatal box of plagues and diseases, evil finally came upon the human race, and progressive decay has been its lot. Hesiod formalized the conception for the Western world of thousands of years into the scheme of the 5 ages, each worse than that which preceded it, till mankind had slipped from the golden age through the ages of silver and bronze into the age of iron, in which our own unhappy lot is cast. Passed on by Greece to Rome, and by Rome to the Middle Ages, the conception was as popular 15 centuries after Christ as it had been 10 centuries before his birth. And the more pessimistic spirits finished it off with the 7th age of the world, to see Antichrist, the destruction of the universe, and the last judgment, all due in a very few years. For men, of course, grow steadily worse and worse, and each particular generation considers its own fault so startling that retribution is overdue. This conception of mankind as a dwindling race doomed to a merited extinction might be considered as a fit product of the most gloomy and sin-burdened ascetics of the Middle Ages. But it is much older than medieval Christianity. The Greeks had the same idea. So had Buddha, who considered the world a hostile thing. So had the old Norsemen, with their weird conception of Ragnarok, the day of the ending of all things, when God's heaven and earth should go up in flames after the powers of hell and destruction had got loose. And this was a much more grim conception than the Christian last judgment, since there the just receive their reward and only the unjust go down to eternal punishment. If the universe bursts up, gods and all, what will become of the idea of justice?
Right, on to the other side. Something funny about the speeds on this record. He seems to slow down, doesn't he? I wonder if he's getting a bit hoarse. Here we go.
The idea that the history of the world is a process of consistent deterioration, from the dim golden age known to our ancestors, down to a catastrophe, an end of creation, well earned by degenerate mankind, is not a very cheerful or inspiring one to guide the way of life. The most obvious deduction from it is, undoubtedly, Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. The average man finds within himself no power to withstand the stream of tendency in which he believes himself to be carried along towards an unhappy end. He does not even exclaim with Hamlet, "The world is out of joint, O cursed spite, that ever I was set it right." For how few minds can conceive the idea that it is their duty to stand against the spirit of the time, hard though the task may be. Such minds, of course, there have been in all ages, even in those of chaos and decay, when there was not even a saving religion to promise a reward for resistance to the pressure of an evil world. The Stoics of later Greece and of Roman imperial times, who without any faith in the discredited gods of Olympus, stood up to prove that right was right and wrong was wrong, and that the self-respecting man must cling to the right, come what may, are certainly examples of such a type. They lived in a most corrupt and unhappy civilization. Their way was certain to be difficult and dangerous, but they were ready to walk in it on first principles, and whatever the consequences. Stoics are never numerous, and they have been accused of being self-conscious and pedantic by their unsympathizing contemporaries. Nevertheless, they earn our respect. The Stoics' lot was much harder than that of other pessimists, who like them believed in the degeneracy and wickedness of the world, but stood out against its influence because they were supported by the inspiration of a religion which promised salvation to the individual, though it prophesied destruction for the world. Among them, I can include the Buddhist, though his idea of salvation was what seems to us a peculiar one: absorption into the Godhead without the survival of personal identity. But to the Christian or the Mohammedan pessimist, the protest against the evil world took the simpler shape of the duty of saving one's own soul. Incidentally, the souls of others if possible, but primarily one's own. This explains the mentality of the early ascetics. Since Simeon Stylites on the top of his 60-foot pillar, or St. Anthony the Hermit in the depths of the Theban desert. Both eschewed all touch with the wicked world because they felt themselves unable to convert it, though they might by untold austerities macerate their own sinful bodies so far as to establish an ad misericordiam appeal of pardon from a just if jealous God. This form of pessimism was as self-regarding as that of the Stoics, and less justifiable, since it ignored the immensity of God's mercy and thought only of his omniscience and justice. And it was certainly much less amiable than the asceticism of St. Francis, who with no less profound belief in the wickedness of the world was able to think of the souls of other men as well as of his own. Nay, he could spare even the kindly thought of bird and beast as well as for human sinners. But Francis of Assisi, though an ascetic, was an optimist. And that makes all the difference between him and Simeon Stylites on his pillar.
Well, that was interesting. When did you last hear an historian mention sinners or anyone of a religious background? Extraordinary. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.